Well, as is traditional, we've got the last part of today's open questions. Obviously got Christine, seems right, and we have Ian and Liz, hopefully in the ether somewhere, who will be free to answer questions on the talks. Obviously, as you know, Natasha's not here with us today, but might try and answer some questions on the Edinburgh side. So I shall throw it open to Stephanie and Helena, who's got the questions, if any.
Yeah, thank you, John. Well, the first couple of comments rather than questions come from Morag, and they're about Natasha's talk. So I'll just read them out. The coal mining was amazingly well documented from the 1680s, and it was owned by a woman. The garden development was traceable day by day in the 1730s. The coal plans for Brunstein ran off their own home mined coal. And then she goes on to say, coal mining at Brunstein was worked in unison with that at Duddingston Estate and sold to Edinburgh and used on the estate's own salt pans. Brunstein House did the coal mining superstructure as so undesirable that they oriented their main rooms away from the mining direction and put their windows deliberately facing away. The records showing this are in the NLS. The large coal pits scarred the 1680s late 18th century ground and show up in the estate plans as huge holes. The garden work can be traced day by day in the 1730s. The records for all industrial and land works are still preserved, much better than almost any other estate I've seen.
I can give a follow-up to that, because that area that she's talking about will be developed for housing in the next few years. So we'll be actually it's going to be a really interesting site potentially coming forward. So yeah, the site that Guard were doing, we're just off to the, God, I'm going to get this wrong, east of the main drag, the main estate, but we're going, there's a big development site happening in the next couple of years. It's not quite started yet, but you might see some evaluation starting very soon on the site.
And that'll be interesting to see how that links in with the work that Guard has done so far. Excellent. Well, the next question is for Ian. And the question is, were they actually buried? This is the two burials, the man and woman. Were they actually buried at the same time? And what did they both die of?
In terms of when they were buried, yeah, we think all the evidence seems to point towards them being buried at the same time. They're very, very close together. They're actually the knees of both of them, and I think the sort of hip areas are very, very, very close. And we didn't find any evidence during the excavation that there was two separate grave cuts. So we were fairly confident during excavation they were buried together. And then I think with the radiocarbon dating given very, very similar, within a few years of each other dates, I think that kind of backs that interpretation up. In terms of what they both died for, that we don't know. There was no evidence of trauma. There was no injuries or anything that they would have died from. I think I mentioned we're getting some DNA analysis carried out, which may give us indications of whether they had any health conditions or disease, sort of genetic diseases that may have had an impact. But often, you don't often necessarily get evidence of what somebody died from the skeletal remains. Somebody might have had an infection or a soft tissue injury, something like that, and that doesn't transfer into the skeleton. So we can't say for definite what they would have died from.
Thank you. The next question is for Liz, and or it's a comment really. The circular structure certainly looks similar to gin gans found in Northumberland locations. And I'll just follow on because the same person has written another question. The mill wheel, you referred to a Northumberland site. Do you have details, please?
I can't remember it was a site that Tom visited really recently. I can't remember off the top of my head where exactly it was. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Liz. Put you on the spot there. And this is our final question, and it's about Natasha's talk. So hopefully John can cover this. Has evidence been found elsewhere in the UK to support the concept of the long industrial revolution? Clearly, there are interesting implications to the historical treatment of the Industrial Revolution if the concept is supported by further archaeological evidence.
I shall refer to Natasha. He says in that one. It's a very interesting concept, and I think it's something that you probably will pick up a lot more as we look into it. Certainly, I can think of other sites in Edinburgh. We can see that sort of longer generation.
Add something.
I think the thing, if I could just say from Natasha's thing, it's really interesting the fact that what she didn't mention is how the following call, and certainly more towards the Langloan one. What we've got is from the Edmonton estate, which is very similar history. We've got that ban, but actually the coal seams rather being horizontal, actually vertical. So what they're seeing is certainly in the, not so much about Emerson, they're certainly vertical. So actually, when they do one, they find them and they follow the seams. It's quite easy, and they don't have to go very deep. I think that's one thing. And there's literally hundreds of them now. And it's that idea, which I think is really interesting, that Natasha's picking up, is we think of a big industrial landscape of the 19th century and scarred. Whereas I think it's interesting that we don't have that time depth, and they're not that deep. Some of them very shallow. So it could actually be for 1 year, come away, backfill it. 10 years later, they backfill it, and it's that idea, because once you know they're there, once you've done 3 or 4 pits in a row, you're just literally following them. In fact, at one point, we actually had a draft for Headland a few years ago. We actually thought we found a Roman fort. We had this huge big ditch because we're following the coal seam and it turned at a right angle. But when we actually looked at it, and because it was, oh my God, we got major discovery. I did. It was a 16th century mining because they actually were following the seam in the big ditch. So, sorry.
Yeah, just to kind of confirm that, I mean, what we are seeing across large chunks of the landscape is this more diffuse beginning to the Industrial Revolution, from medieval monks, New Battle and things like that, all the way through, and it's just slowly catch a monkey.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to pick up. It's how coal mining is used for lots of different things. It's not just about heating. I think Natasha, very good, was talking about the 17th century salt mining, which is across the whole Lothian, and probably certainly the fourth estuaries, and you find it either side of the exploitation. Then you've got the potteries are coming on, they're using it for that. So it's a fuel, it's much for industrialization, and it really is 17th and 18th and later. In terms of domestic, we've got evidence of coal, I think, in Edinburgh being used in the medieval period, but certainly looking at different things.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's the introduction of coal for things like the pot, and certainly in East Lothian potteries, the salt panning, which are quite early starts. We're starting to see it coming in because we don't, and have never probably had the amount of forestation that we would need.
Yeah, that was wiped out really by the medieval period, and actually, I think it's the early monks. I think it's the one in East Lothian where we've got, must be some of the earliest evidence of coal mining in the UK. Was it 13th century or something? Yeah.
Great. Well, that's all the questions we've got. So I'll just pass back to you, John.
Liz was just what added the Northumberland mill. White to them there.
Oh.
She's added where the mill wheel came from.
Hoik.
Hoik. Sorry, just
not Hoik. Hoik. Thanks, Liz. Let's speak. Anybody else got any comments in the room, or Hugh? Well, thanks very much. I'd just like to, it's my job, a great pleasure to sort of say thank you to, first of all, to all our speakers and those here in person who were here this morning, and obviously those online. And for those who, for Angela who couldn't make it, and I hope she gets well very soon. She's a bit poorly this week. I'd just like to thank you all on behalf of the organising committee for your time and dedication yet again and support. So thank you, the audience. Also, not without least Cam for his wonderful, well, basically we couldn't do it without you today. So I'd just like to say that in terms of for technical support, and also for the Queen Margaret University again for their continued support and help in organising this annual conference, which is very much appreciated. I know it takes a big burden off our shoulders when we've got experts like yourself helping us out. Moving on to the general thanks also to our sponsors. First of all our local authority organisations, Edinburgh Council, East Lothian Council and Scottish Borders, also to Sark Environment Scotland for the continuing support for our grant, to ALGO, the Association of Local Government Archaeological Officers, who we're all members of, who also continue to support us in this role, and especially for community outreach is very much fundamental to what we all do in ALGO. I should say that as chair. And really thank you as well for all the many of you who've tuned in and given your time on a Saturday to listen to what I hope you find a very fascinating series of talks covering the wide aspects of what we all do as local authority archaeologists, from development control work through outreach and working with community members itself. And I'd just like to say it's been a strange couple of years, and I think we're all zoomed out, teamed out, or whatever social media venue we're all out at the moment. I'd like to hope you all safekeeping as well, but next year is going to be a special one for us. It's our 20th anniversary and next year, so hopefully, we said this last year, but please, hopefully, we can all meet in person and actually have a celebration to what is I still think it's a fantastic conference and wide-ranging across the southeast of Scotland. So thank you very much for attending, and goodbye and good health.